The discussions were led by journalists under the umbrella body, the National Union of Somali Journalists, and attracted representatives of the media, the federal government, women, the youth, and members of the civil society from different parts of the country. Hawalul, a female journalist with Commemorate Radio, emphasized the importance of the media in ensuring that different views in Somali society are shared and accommodated.
I'm working in a war-ravaged country that has witnessed a lot of bloodshed. Since this event has brought together different groups of people, it's important that we discuss the problems affecting this country. As a journalist, I must participate in building peace, listen to and share different ideas of the Somalis to be able to contribute to the peace programs.
Somali journalists have been in the lead for taking the campaigns for peace for a long time. It's not something that has just started. Actually, for the last 22 years, there has been anarchy, warlords, religious warlords, terrorism, piracy. But the media has been a model for, campaigning for peace. And what we believe is that without the media campaign for peace, I think that, sustainable peace in Somalia has not been reached.
In a country where few foreign journalists would dare to venture, many international news organizations often rely on local journalists to tell Somalia's story. Somalia has often made headlines as a scene of near unremitting conflict for 2 decades. But over the years, journalists here have also become targets, making Somalia one of the most dangerous places in the world to report.
When we are Somali journalists, I think we are the most, it's important for us, for peace. And we need reality because every day journalists were killed in here, in Somalia. And also wounded. Some journalists fled the country. So I believe we need peace. That's important for us. We are doing for peace our lives.
Islamist group Al-Shabaab, which emerged as a fighting force in 2006, often attacked journalists. Al-Shabaab lost control of the Somali capital Mogadishu to African forces in 2011, but has continued hit-and-run gun and bomb attacks in capital and elsewhere. The group maintains strongholds in southern and central Somalia, where African forces with the Somali army recently launched a new offensive to retake territory. The journalists at the meeting agreed that peace is vital for a free media to function in the country. With the ability to reach millions of Somalis through radio, TV, and the internet, the media has the power to influence a nation. These journalists believe they can help make a difference, helping to bring peace and stability back to their once war-torn country.
Well, after the break on Network Africa, a United Nations report confirms a positive trend which has seen the number of hungry people decline globally by more than 100 million over the last decade. Please stay with us. Welcome back. You're still watching Network Africa on Channels Television. Now let's take a quick look at stories making rounds outside of the African continent. The US-led coalition against Islamic State has targeted 12 oil refineries in Syria during the third night of airstrikes against the militants. The raids carried out by the United States, Saudi and UAE aircraft killed 14 IS fighters and 5 civilians in eastern Syria. The US military said the refineries generated as much as $2 million per day in revenue for the militants, and that's why it was targeted. Then, France's Defense Council is to hold a crisis meeting after the beheading of a tourist, Hervé Gourdel, by Algerian militants linked to Islamic State. The meeting was called by President Francois Hollande, who condemned the killing as cruel and cowardly. June al-Khilafa group killed Mr. Gourdel after giving France an ultimatum to halt its air attacks on IS in Iraq. Finally, Cyprus has launched a rescue mission for 300 people thought to be Syrian refugees stranded off the island's west coast. Most of the people on the small fishing boat were believed to be women and children. They were spotted 100 kilometers south of the resort town of Paphos, and helicopters were at the scene. Well, according to a new United Nations report released this week, about 805 million people in the world, that's 1 in 9, suffer from hunger. The state of food insecurity in the world confirmed a positive trend, which has seen the number of hungry people decline globally by more than 100 million over the last decade. According to a report by the United Nations Food Agency, International Fund for Agricultural Development and World Food Programme, the number of chronically undernourished people dropped by more than 100 million. Contained in this latest report titled, "The State of Food Insecurity in the World," we understand that government drives to improve nutrition have helped the developing world to move towards a UN goal of halving the number of people suffering from hunger between 1990 and 2015.
We have 200 million less malnourished people nowadays compared when we started 1990s. And also, to be more precisely, 209 million. In the same period, the prevalence of undernourished has followed globally by 18.7% to 11.3%.
According to FAO, the Ebola virus also provides a potential threat to food security in West Africa, while conflicts in places such as South Sudan and the Central African Republic are preventing humanitarian efforts to help people affected. This means that people who once had enough food could lose reliable supplies in just a matter of weeks. FAO issued a food security alert this month for Liberia, Sierra Leone, and Guinea, which were all net cereal importers even before the Ebola outbreak prompted border closures and quarantine zones, contributing to farm labor shortages.
There are families that don't have enough to eat. They're eating grass and leaves to keep themselves alive right now. If this continues, then we'll get famine in parts of this country.
The ambitious goal to halve the absolute number of chronically undernourished people between 1990 and 2015 has been met by 25 developing countries, but there is not enough time for the whole world to get there by next year.
Progress has been quite uneven among different regions and sub-regions. The progress has been greatest in Southeast Asia and East Asia more generally, as well as in Latin America. There has been much less progress in South Asia and very little progress in Sub-Saharan Africa until fairly recently.
But the agencies urged more efforts elsewhere, especially in Sub-Saharan Africa and Southern and Western Asia, to reduce the hungry share of the population in developing countries to 11.7% from 13.5% today by the end of 2015. The report is published annually by the Food and Agriculture Organization, FAO, the International Fund for Agricultural Development, IFAD, and the World Food Programme, WFP. Now, when you hear about South Sudan, what usually comes to mind is an ethnic crisis. But today, you are expecting to hear about crisis. I'm very glad to disappoint you. Instead, our attention is on George Mali, who's a young South Sudanese student who's designed and created a light aircraft. He discovered his talent and love for aeronautics when he was just 5 years old. However, the crisis in the world's newest country is threatening his dreams of becoming an aeronautics engineer, but he is determined not to give up.
Parked inside a small compound in Juba, South Sudan, is a small light aircraft. The plane was created by 23-year-old George John Mail, a high school student who discovered his passion for aeroplanes when he was a young boy. This is his second prototype. He built the plane using locally sourced materials such as scrap metal and discarded plastic in sacks.
This isn't my first work or my first invent. I've done a lot since I was still a kid. Yeah. I've been doing some research and try to work out small aircrafts, make them. There's the one I made before this. It was a UAV, unmanned aerial vehicle, but I didn't have the system to control it. The wiring, GPS and all this. So that's why I came with an idea of making the second one that could carry a weight of a person. Yeah, it's powered by 2 gasoline engine, almost like generator, but it's a little bit different. You can adjust the speed. Yeah.
George works at home and has turned his room into a workshop, which he calls aerotech research. He's also an artist and uses his drawing and painting skills to design airplanes. He develops his prototypes using information he finds on the internet. George wants to study aeronautic engineering, but his dreams were interrupted by the ongoing fighting in the country. South Sudan has been mired in conflicts between government forces and rebels since mid-December, and George no longer goes to school because of security fears. Illiteracy and poverty are high in Africa's youngest nation, and there's no college or university here where George can study aeronautics. George's family would also rather he pursued a more conventional career. But despite the challenges, the young inventor remains optimistic.
There are times whereby I'm discouraged because when I do these things, they sometimes call me I'm crazy and all this. Even sometimes when I bring the material, I sneak them into the house through the fence so that they will not see it. If they see it, they'll start saying I'm wasting money on crazy stuff. Yeah.
Finding funding for his projects has also been difficult. He even took his first aircraft to the country's Air Force.
The first plane I made before this, I took it to Air Force, but since then nothing was done about it. It was just left there. It was trashed by wind and all this. Yeah.
Although George's plane isn't quite ready for passengers yet, he believes with the right support he can become one of Africa's greatest aerospace innovators.
And that's it on this episode of Network Africa. Many thanks for watching. I'm Cynthia Are. As always, I'd love to hear from you, so feel free to send me an SMS via the number on your screen. Until next time, stay blessed and proudly African. I'm Cynthia Are. Bye for now.
A time comes in the life of every race when people are driven by echoes of the past to chart a course for an exalted future. Africa is at this threshold. As major actors in the Africa arena plot a renaissance towards common destiny, let's pedal across the streams of yesterday, through the backstreets of Africa to the defining roles of policymakers, the political realities of the African nation, balance of power, and a strive to sustain national interest and identity. Join us on Network Africa on Channels Television. Network Africa, the rallying point for the emergence of a new Africa.